We are alive. We are here, everybody. Thank you for being here. Um, if you're ready, I'm ready. I don't think we have to have too much preamble.
I'm here. I'm ready. I've got thoughts about movies.
All right. Notes and everything. Phil, good evening. Amy, good evening. All right. In that case, then, we are going to get started in 3, 2, 1.
Capsuling press. Roger that.
Inspired by the late President Kennedy, in only 7 years, America has risen to the challenge of what he called the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
Okay, ready to go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 185, and our movie this week is 1995's Apollo 13. Joining me, because he'd never seen it before, from The Picture Show, it's Austin Rude. Austin, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here talking movies with someone who is not my dad. Love
Switch
my
it up.
dad, but he is who I talk to on mic most of the time, so I'm glad to have a new face to shoot some opinions with.
There you go. Change it up a little bit every once in a while. It's good to do that, mix things up. So you brought this movie to my attention that you had not seen it before. What type of what if any history or knowledge did you have of this movie prior to watching it for this show?
Not a whole lot. I'm like a huge space nerd. I will talk about it for days if you let me. And so this is one of those like classic space movies I feel like that I've heard a lot about,
Mm-hmm.
but I just hadn't seen because it was before my time.
Sure.
And then one day I saw it on like the clearance bin at a store and I was like, why not get it? So I bought it and I had it for about a month and just hadn't watched it because sometimes I get in this mode where I'd rather watch things like rewatch things that I know already.
Sure.
And then you were like, what movie do you want to see that you haven't seen before? And I was like, Apollo 13, because it seems like it'll be a good movie.
It's
And
a
I
very
think it was.
yeah, it's a really good choice. So you liked the movie.
I did like the movie.
Excellent. So this movie came out in 1995, and it was right in the peak of Tom Hanks' powers. Right, he had done Philadelphia a couple of years earlier, won the Oscar for that. He did Forrest Gump, and won an Oscar for that one as well. He made this in 1995. This was peak kind of Tom Hanks drama roles because he had morphed and changed from his 80s persona of mostly comedies, which I don't know how many of those you've seen, but things like Big and The Burbs and The Money Pit. And he was known for that.
I much more know him for his dramas. I think that's kind of the reputation that's stuck with him.
Mhm.
I haven't heard much about the comedies.
Yeah, I mean, he started off on a television show called Bosom Buddies, and transitioned into movies. He made things like Volunteers is a good one. I thought was quite funny. Joe versus the Volcano is another one. He did a lot of these comedies. He was also known for romantic comedies like Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail, but he had transitioned into and started doing these much heavier dramas. And it turns out, hey, he's not just a funny guy; he's really good. And nowadays, I would say yes, he's much more known. Some of it also depends on like sort of when you discovered Tom Hanks. Like for me, because I was old enough to have seen him in things like Dragnet and The Burbs, like that's what I can remember.
Yes!
And you being a little bit younger, it makes sense that you would know him more for the dramas. He plays a astronaut by the name of Jim Lovell, who is a real astronaut. Everybody in this movie are real people, which I like the fact that they didn't have any of those like made up amalgamations of people. Because that can sometimes happen if you have ever noticed is on movies based on real events. Oftentimes they'll kind of trim down and maybe take 2 or 3 real people and kind of make them into one character.
Right, trying to simplify all the roles and whatnot.
Yep, exactly. And they didn't do that here. Everybody that's in this movie is who they were in this event. And how familiar with were you with kind of the Apollo 13 mission in general? Not just the movie, but the mission, being a space nerd.
Oh, I knew the basic story. I knew that they were going to the moon. Something malfunctioned. They wouldn't have survived if they made it to the moon, and they just had to turn back around. But I did not know that there were this many kind of mechanics and things that continued to go wrong, and that they had to calculate throughout the journey. That was new information to me.
Okay, yeah. So it's based on the Apollo 13 mission, and it's based on Jim Lovell's book. He wrote a book about it, and then they adapted that book into the screenplay for this. Most of it is apparently very accurate. There's a few, little things here and there to make it more Hollywood. I think there was one moment where one of the technical advisors there's that moment where so our 3 main astronauts on the mission are played by Tom Hanks, Bill Paxton, and Kevin Bacon. And there's that moment where Bill Paxton and Kevin Bacon are kind of arguing a little bit back and forth. And like the technical advisor was like, oh, that argument wouldn't have taken place. And Ron Howard, the director, said, yeah, I understand that, but we're trying to make a drama movie here, and I can only pull so much drama out of like a sweaty forehead before I need something else.
Right. I mean, astronauts are trained to kind of go through situations like this and not get emotional, but in a drama, you want to heighten the stakes. So
yep, exactly.
I think that makes complete sense.
And so like that made me chuckle quite a bit when I read that. But yeah, so let's talk a bit about our 3 main characters here. So Tom Hanks is Jim Lovell. What do you think of him?
I think he did a good job with portraying like silent angst. Like there's a lot of like little moments of him realizing like in the beginning there's a lot of politics about who's going to be able to actually go on Apollo 13.
Yep.
And he has to choose whether he's going to go with stand with his current pilot and wait for Apollo 14 if that ever happens, or if he's going to continue with a new crew. There's that, and there's also when they're not able to actually land on the moon, and everyone's like looking out the window, and he's like, I've already seen it before. Right. Because he just knows, like, you can see the heartbreak in him, and I feel like that's portrayed really well. And like his commanding presence there, but I don't think he's the most interesting character here.
No, I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because there's so many interesting characters in here, but I think one of the things you hit the nail on the head where he has this silent heartbreak going on, and like all these things that are happening to him. Like this is a man who had gone up in Apollo 8, had circled the moon, but they didn't land. This was that's all he wanted. He wanted to walk on the moon. And we open up the movie with him watching Neil Armstrong and Apollo 11 and them landing and walking on the moon. And that was his thing. He wanted to do it. So then the opportunity arises, and he only has 6 months to prepare, but he's going to do it anyway. And for him to not get that, to not achieve that goal, but get so close to it again, is heartbreaking. And I think that's the thing that Hanks brings to it, is this like realism, this real feel to it, where you can just see that failure washing over him, but then he has the realization of like, I just want to go home. That scene where they're taking pictures and looking out the window, and he's like, gentlemen, what is your intention here? Like, we've got a bunch of stuff we got to do in order to make sure we get home. And that's the most important part right now. We're not landing. and I loved that
Right.
scene. But yeah,
It makes a lot of sense knowing that this is adapted from his autobiography, because he really is like the point of view character here.
Yep.
And he experiences these emotions that they're all experiencing, but we really see it in him.
Yes. And I just think that Tom Hanks brings this humanity to roles that he does. He is America's dad in a lot of ways, is the joke, but it's kind of true. Like he's that everyman that just you can relate to in a situation like that. And I did enjoy that. Also, by the way, the real Jim Lovell does have a cameo in this movie.
Really, I was telling my dad, like, oh, he should have been maybe in the credits. They show like real videos of him or something. I didn't know he was in this movie.
Yeah, so right at the end, when they're on the aircraft carrier, the Iwo Jima, and the captain of the aircraft carrier is shaking his hand, and there's the voiceover from Tom Hanks where he says, "And as for me, blah, 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 blah." When he says that captain, that's actually Jim Lovell.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and Ron Howard...
I-
this was a cool bit of trivia. Ron Howard was like, "So do you want to be the admiral on the aircraft carrier?" And Jim Lovell told him, "Look, I retired a captain. I'm going to stay a captain. So I'll be I will dress as a captain." And I thought that was cool. But I thought it was great they put him in
That's
there.
wonderful. I actually looked it up because I was like, would he have been alive when this movie was made to cameo in it or to do anything in it?
Mhm.
And I found out he's still alive to this day, which that shocked me completely. I mean, it shouldn't, because Buzz Aldrin is still
Yeah,
alive
I mean,
to this day. So
you figure he was in probably his middle 30s at the time, which would have been roughly 50 years ago or so. Little over 50 years ago. So I mean, he's up there, but yeah, he's still kicking. And I just love that they had him have the cameo, and he really enjoyed Tom Hanks' performance in the movie. Jim Lovell's wife said that Hanks really got down a lot of his like mannerisms and kind of patterns of speech. So he seemed to do a really good job with portraying this actual person, which this was the first time Tom Hanks played like a real person, not just somebody based off of like an amalgamation of a couple of people or a completely fictional character. He was playing a real human being, and he's
and
really
after
good.
this, he did a lot of biopics. He's Saving Mr. Banks and
Mhm.
Sully. And I can see he's got a knack for it, for kind of getting these people down.
Yeah. Yep. He studies the people a lot. Mr. Rogers, playing Fred Rogers.
Oh yeah.
And he does such a great job with all of that. He's very skilled at his craft, and he really puts a lot of effort into it. And it shows, because he doesn't just play Tom Hanks in every movie. Even though he has that kind of box office draw to be the type of movie star that can do that, he doesn't. He brings something to it all the time, while still being Tom Hanks all the time. It's interesting the way he pulls that off, and I quite enjoy it. I love Tom Hanks movies.
Oh, you can tell he's a good actor.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you said you didn't think that he was the most interesting character in the movie. I'm curious who you thought was the most interesting character.
Well, I'm kind of tied there, but I really wanted to highlight Bill Paxton as Fred Hayes.
Yep.
Because I think his storyline is so tragic as the pilot that was left behind, for the possibility of getting sick when he didn't even get sick.
Oh,
It's
that
like-
was Gary Sinise.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mixed up my cast list here.
Nope, that's okay. Yeah, Bill Paxton was one of the three that did go up. Fred Hayes. Gary
Yeah,
Sinise was Ken Mattingly.
He was the newbie, right?
The newbie was Swigert. That was Kevin Bacon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the crew
Gotcha.
was Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Ken Mattingly. Ken Mattingly was their pilot, and that was Gary Sinise. And they got exposed to measles. He hadn't had measles before, so they were afraid that he would show symptoms and have problems, and so they scrubbed him. They wouldn't let him go, and he was replaced at the last minute. And extremely last minute. 2 days before launch, they had to swap out for Jack Swigert, which is crazy to think
I'm
about.
surprised they didn't cancel at that point, because that's just so close to cutting it.
I know. That's one of the amazing things about this is like today they would have scrubbed the mission and pushed it back or whatever. But no, they went with it. So, but okay, let's talk a little bit about Bill Paxton as Fredo Hayes. I liked Bill Paxton. He's a lot of fun, but he got to be Bill Paxton in this quite a bit. Like, kind of that a little bit of comedy, comic relief, right? He's playing a little loosey goosey, but they did a great job of mixing that with him getting sick over time during the mission too, which is ironic, right? That the guy they boot off for potentially getting measles, and then Fred ends up going and he gets, I think the real Fred Hayes ended up with like a urinary tract infection was what he was suffering from. That's why he was dealing with the cold a lot worse, and he was all that kind of stuff.
Right. I didn't fully understand what illness he had, because they never fully explain. But
yeah, they don't.
It is interesting to watch him get weaker and weaker throughout the later end of the journey.
Yeah, it had to do with the system they would use to pee on the capsule. And he got some kind of a urinary tract infection from that, which makes the joke about him getting the clap from Swigert funny, like even funnier. But I like Bill Paxton, and I think that he fit the role really well, because he has a really good chemistry with Tom Hanks too. I feel like they played off of each other well, and you could tell they gave that impression of like being good friends, which a crew like that would be, because you'd spend so much time together.
Right, and you also get to see their wives interacting back on Earth, which is interesting to see, because his wife, who's pregnant, is going to Jim's wife and is like, "How do you do this like all the time? So stressful."
We'll get to them, because I can't imagine that at all. At all. So we mentioned Ken Mattingly, Gary Sinise, and Phil mentioned that his character is just tragic, and it really is. To get that close to being able to go on this mission and then have it scrubbed. So there's that scene where he's sitting at home, and it's like the night that everything goes wrong, and just before the news story comes up, he gets up, takes the phone off the hook, shuts the TV off, and just walks away. And it's
right.
like
he doesn't want to watch it because it's his dream going to someone else.
Yep. And I totally get that. And I totally get him just being like, nope, don't want to hear a damn thing. I am checking out for the night. And for him to get woke up the next morning by the NASA guys just coming right into his apartment, right into his bedroom, like, come on, man, get up. We need you. And he, to his credit, just snaps right into it and is like, all right, we're going to figure this out. And he would not rest until they figured that out. And this is, just like I was saying, this is kind of at the peak of Tom Hanks and his powers, and sort of almost like right in his wheelhouse. This was coming off of Forrest Gump, which was the breakout role of Lieutenant Dan for Gary Sinise. So for him to come off the heels of that right into this movie, I think was great for him. And it's such a good character for him to play. And he gives it this this kind of stoic heartbreak, right? Because you can tell it's tearing him up inside, and yet he plays it so stoically and exactly the way that you would have to if you were that person in that situation.
Right. He has like that quick outburst when Jim tells him that it was his call to make, and then I think the most heartbreaking shot is when he's watching the rocket launch just from his car.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has to overcome that grudge and actually help them. Just like, I think it's one of the biggest character arcs in this.
Yeah.
Going from, oh, I hate that you're leaving without me, to let me save your life.
Yeah, and you think about the fact that so he gets booted off the mission 2 days before launch. And the mission was a total of 7 days, right? And it wasn't until like day 3 that problems started because they were most of the way, or they were part way there.
Mhm.
So he had like 5 days of being extremely upset and stewing with this before suddenly he had to be there to help bring these men back. And he just jumped right to the call like it was nothing, and like I'm going to make sure they get home, and I will do everything I can to make that happen. You're right. It is a great arc, and it's a great performance. Gary Sinise just knocks it out of the park in this.
He really does.
Then we get like so that's the astronauts. That's our 4 main astronauts. But then there's all the people at Mission Control. Starting with Ed Harris as Gene Kranz, who has that great I love the vest that he wears, and how they make like a big deal out of that thing, which apparently the actual vest is in, I think it's the Smithsonian, and they said that a lot of the reason for that is because of how popular it was from the movie.
Really?
Yeah, because it was a real thing that happened. Again, this movie's authentic. The stuff that happened in this movie happened, with some small caveats, like little technical details, like when the rocket takes off, and you see that shot overhead, and all like the arms are swinging away, kind of one by one. Those would have all swung away kind of simultaneously, but whatever. Like that's a tiny. I mean, you're
It's
talking
a build up,
Yeah, and
Give
like
them artistic license there.
right, it looks so much cooler the way they did it in the movie, and it's more dramatic that way. But that's like nitpicking for the sake of nitpicking. But like Gene Kranz is such an interesting character in the fact that he does not at any point give up the hope they are going to bring these guys back. We have not lost anybody yet. We're not going to now. And he
won't even give the president like odds of their survival. He's just like, nope, we are working on it, and we're gonna get them home.
Yep. Yeah. And they just totally, he just 100% like, we're going to make this happen, and I don't care how we do it, make it happen. And he commands that room and all of those men. Like, it's perfect the way he's able to get people on task quickly, and keep them on task without ever seeming like an overbearing blowhard, or like he never goes over the top, right? He's just laser focused. So,
right. And I think it helps that you understand the situation and the stress that he's under.
Mm-hmm.
But he does it in almost a kind-hearted way. Like, you got to do this.
Yep, exactly. And Ed Harris is just amazing. Like he's got such a good presence on screen, and then an intensity that he brought to this. Plus, he's got a very commanding voice. And I again, this movie's full of those actors that I just love seeing and stuff. And Ed Harris is one of them. And yeah, he was great as Gene Kranz in this. Let's see. You got Kathleen Quinlan was Marilyn Lovell, and Jim's wife, and she was really good. And
her whole storyline, really all the family. And they're not doing much. They're just sitting at home watching. But that's what gives the stakes, and you feel the emotion every time she's on screen. When she's dealing with the family and they're all huddled around the TV, or when she's just by herself listening to the radio as things go wrong. It's really sad.
Yeah, it's an emotional arc. She goes through a lot. Like, as at the beginning of it, she's excited for him to get to go to the moon, but then she doesn't want to go to the launch because she has that nightmare about problem happening, which, according to Marilyn Lovell, she had that nightmare because there was a movie that had come out in 1969 that was after the moon landing, or around the time of the moon landing, There's a movie that came out that dealt with a mission to the moon and a problem, and so Jim had taken her to that as a date night movie, and after seeing it, she had that nightmare, and so that was real. So then she's like, I don't want to go, but she's not telling him, like she's not giving him this whole I've got a bad feeling about your mission, which I'm glad that she didn't do, and I feel like they could have made that into more of a dramatic melodramatic kind of relationship, to have her like not want him to go and all that. And I'm really glad they didn't go that route, right? Because
Well, I feel like she definitely doesn't want him to go, but she knows there's no stopping him.
True.
And you can kind of see that on her face when she's telling him that she doesn't want to go to the launch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're not far off there. Also the wedding ring thing, which some people thought was too like manufactured and forced, really happened. She actually did drop her wedding ring.
I thought it was just like some symbolism they threw in there.
Yeah, it's what it feels like, doesn't it? But apparently, no, that was a real thing that happened. She did get it back. She was able to fish it out, but she did actually drop her wedding ring down the drain at one point. So I thought, because I thought the same thing, especially even watching it this time. I'm like, oh, that's, it's good art. It's good symbolism to throw that in there. But no, that was a real deal.
Can I talk real quick about Apollo 1 and how they touched on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I just thought it was so brilliant. I feel like a lot of space stories shy away from that, but this movie opens with that tragedy. And it's kind of a thread throughout. Like I love when Jim is talking to his son, explaining the mission, explaining what he's gonna do, and his son's like, "Is there gonna be a fire? I heard about a fire." And then later, when they have to tell him that something went wrong with his dad's mission, he goes, "Is it the door?"
Yeah.
Like that broke my heart. That was really tragic.
That kid, by the way, Miko Hughes, who did a lot of work right around that age. He was really good, and it broke my heart too. The way he would deliver those lines. He had been in Kindergarten Cop. He was Gage in the 1989 Pet Sematary. He was in Mercury Rising with Bruce Willis. Like he did a lot right around that era at that age, and that kid could bring some emotion. When he asked if it was the door, I was like, "Oh, come on, that hurts." So yeah, I liked him quite a bit, and yeah, I'm really glad that they touched on that. I'm also glad that you brought that up. That's a great one, because I probably would have forgotten to mention anything about Apollo 1.
Well, I mean, I feel like at the time of the space race and all of these early Apollo missions, that was on everyone's mind because they had all heard about that, watched it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely was. I mean, it's hard to think about it now because it's not such a big thing, but like this was an era where every space launch was especially up until Apollo 11, was like appointment viewing. Everybody stopped what they were doing. All the networks showed it. And you sat down and watched. Like that whole watch party thing was not just Apollo 11. That was all of the space launches. So for them to not televise stuff initially, which is why, Marilyn has that whole, like, I loved her reactions to when they are doing the broadcast from the ship and they find out partway through that it's not on air anywhere, that none of the stations are carrying it. And it's the first time that's happened. And there's the NASA, like, public relations guys trying to talk to her about it. And she's like, well, why aren't they showing it? And he's like, it's not newsworthy. But then, a day later, when all the news crews are out on her front lawn because there's a problem, suddenly it's newsworthy. And she's like, no, they can get off my lawn. They can't be here. And I wouldn't blame her for that reaction at all. Like, that seemed completely genuine.
In the beginning of the movie, when he's doing like the tour at NASA, I believe it's the Texas senator or governor or someone in government is like, well, he mentions Apollo 14 and he's like, well, if there is an Apollo 14,
Right.
you know, because we've already been to space, why am I still funding this?
Mm-hmm.
As if like people are already moving on when Neil Armstrong just walked on the moon.
Yeah. By the way, that senator was played by Roger Corman, which made me laugh a lot that they got a cameo from Roger Corman playing a senator who doesn't want to spend money on the space program anymore. Because Roger Corman would spend the least amount of money possible to make a movie. So it's like perfect to have him be that guy. And I don't know if that was a purposeful, like, let's get Roger Corman for this and have it be him or not. But I loved that was the case. So
The
yeah.
fun cameo.
Mm-hmm. It really is. There was a couple of fun cameos in this. Before we get too far in, I got to mention this movie was directed by Ron Howard, so of course his brother Clint Howard is going to be in it. He was one of the Ecom White, Cy, the one with the big glasses and balding. That was Clint Howard, but also Ron Howard's parents, Rance and Rance Howard was the priest that was watching the final news thing with her, where he's sitting on the couch. He doesn't have any lines of dialogue, but that's the director's dad. And the director's mother played Jim Lovell's mom, the one in the retirement home.
Oh wow, and she was really good.
Yeah, she was, and that was Ron Howard's mom. Who? Oh, I'm missing her name right off the top of my head. Somebody
I
can.
had it a second ago. Jean Splegel, if I'm pronouncing that right. Jean Spiegel Howard.
There you go, Gene Spiegel Howard. Yep, and she was great.
I did recognize his brother, not as his brother, but I recognized him.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
because my dad was in the room, I asked him, "Who is that?" And he told me that that's Ron Howard's brother, and he's in almost every Ron Howard movie, which is how I recognized him, even though I had no idea who he was.
Yep. Yeah, he shows up in every Ron Howard movie. He's done, some other stuff too. Famously, he was on an episode of the original Star Trek when he was just a child, very, very young. But yeah, Clint Howard is great. He's got a very unique look, and he's awesome. So, but it was cool to see both, because I've seen Rance Howard pop up in some Ron Howard movies too. But this is the first time I can consciously remember seeing his mom anywhere, and she has one of the great lines in the movie too, when she's which I did capture. I will play a little bit later, but it was great. Clint Howard did have a really good ad-libbed line that if I don't mention it, I will forget because I didn't capture it. It's when they're doing their broadcast and Jack Swigert says, "Oh, by the way, IRS, I'm sorry, I forgot to file my 1040 return," and Cy responds with like, "Oh no, that's serious. They'll nail him for that." That was ad-libbed by Clint Howard because apparently he had some tax problems at one point, like not paying his taxes or not filing his taxes or something. So that made me laugh. That line was delivered so well.
Yeah, I thought all the tax jokes in there were really funny because they
really
call back
was.
to it at a certain point.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, let's see. So Marilyn Lovell, like, again, just coming back to that, Kathleen Quinlan was amazing in that role because of all the emotion she had, but she had to try and stay strong for her kids too. Meanwhile, she's falling apart inside, worried that her husband's not coming home. And then for her to like show up at the launch and be there for that, because that's one thing. Unless you're paying attention and reading the little subtitles that pop up occasionally, you don't think about the fact that they live in Houston, Texas, but the launch was happening in Florida.
Right?
So
She had to fly out there.
yeah, he flew out 2 days earlier, and she had to leave and fly out there to be at that launch. So that was a bigger moment than you would think of, and they almost downplay it in the movie the way that it happens.
I really like how they did it though. How she just shows up and they kind of have a funny little moment joking like I can't remember the exact lines, but "Oh, who told you you could be here?" or something of the other. Just like almost like they know how serious the moment is, but they're trying to reassure each
Oh
other,
yeah.
and they have this language between them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, there's you can tell how strong that relationship is between Jim and Marilyn by the way that they can banter in that moment with as important and emotional a moment as it is. And with how much like the tension you could feel in that scene where she tells him she doesn't want to go to the launch when they're driving.
Yep.
There's so like the tension you could cut with a knife, and yet neither one of them blows up. It doesn't become this big melodrama. That I loved the downplay of that because that felt like no, she knows she's not changing his mind about going, and he knows he's not changing her mind about not going to the launch. Like he just knows that, but at the same time, like they have to kind of not so much push down the emotion, but they can't let it out at that time. Like it's not the right time for it. At some point, they can have that conversation again, but it's just not the place for it. So then, for her to show up a couple of days later, and they can have the kind of interaction that they did, I loved. I thought that was great, and that really shows the strength of their bond and their relationship. How many did you recognize any of the other actors in that Mission Control? Kind of all those side characters. Did any of them stand out to you as you've seen them in other movies? I mean, you've seen enough movies. I'm sure you recognize at least a couple of them.
I mean, the one I did notice was Cam from Modern Family being in this, which my dad pointed out because I didn't recognize him without doing his like gay voice. He had this very deep voice compared to Cam in Modern Family.
Yep.
But yeah, I thought it was fun seeing him years before he'll be on that show.
Yeah. Yeah, there was him. There was let's see. Oh, there he is, Gene Spiegelhauer. Chris Ellis was Deke Slayton. I've seen him. He's a character actor. Pops up in a bunch of stuff. Joe Spano, the NASA director. I most know him from NCIS. He played an FBI agent in that recurring character. And he's been in a few other things, but I always remember him from that. And I love Joe Spano. And for a very small role, he's good. All these kind of side characters, these guys in that room. Xander Berkeley, who was the PR guy, Henry, I remember him from Terminator 2. He was the stepdad in that. He's in a lot of stuff. He was great. Who was there? Lauren Dean was John Aaron, who was the ECOM guy. He was the one that was working with Gary Sinise later on the electrical issue.
Very much concerned with like the wattages and all that.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. I remember from Enemy of the State, actually. He had a prominent role in that, and I really liked him in this because he's that guy that's just like, nope, this has to happen, but we don't have what we need. We got to figure it out. And he's just, to bring that up because no one else was thinking about that part of it at the time as they're trying to come up with their plan. And he's like, I've been going over the numbers. This is what's got to happen.
It's all numbers, and numbers won't change no matter how upsetting it is to you. And he's like, no, you got to stick with it.
Yeah. Yep. Where is the one? There was somebody else who he wasn't the flight controller, but he was sitting up towards the front of the room. He had kind of a big nose. He was in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is what I remember him from. Let me see if I can find him again. Because I know him from that, but he's been in a bunch of other stuff too, and I don't know why I can't think of his name now. There was Brett Cullen, who was Capcom 1. He was the one that did a lot of the vocal interactions with the astronauts. Ray McKinnon. That's it. Thank you, Phil. Ray McKinnon. He's great. He was Vernon T. Waldrip in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which I always remember him from because he's there's something about, but he's great. He's another one who is these character actors that show up in a bunch of stuff, and there's a lot of them in these backgrounds at the mission control. So I wanted to mention him. Thank you, Phil, for that. And I also want to talk a bit about the technical aspects of making this movie, because the performances are great across the board. Everybody nails it. And they all look the part. But as far as making this movie, they made it look good. If I had told you this movie was made 5 years ago, would you believe it? Because this movie was made
No.
almost 30 years ago.
I mean, the CGI and the effects, I could kind of see that being a more recent movie. I had no idea. This whole time when I was watching it, I thought, are they in harnesses when they're in the capsule, and maybe they just remove it later? But then I found out later they're using what is it called?
The Vomit Comet.
The Vomit Comet. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, they it's a KC-135 that NASA had. So all of the weightless stuff is either simulating it with like they'd have like a seesaw type thing they could sit on and kind of bounce up and down and move around for some of the shots. But they had something around, say, 54 minutes of footage that they were able to get 23 seconds at a time using the Vomit Comet to be weightless. So all of that is real weightlessness that they were able to pull
That's
off.
crazy because, I mean, the amount of time that it'll take to get all of those shots, because you can only be in that kind of falling fake zero gravity for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's expensive. So to do that, I mean, they must have been working at it for weeks. That's a heavy feat.
They had 13 days of flights at roughly 20 to 23 seconds a time. They did 612 parabolic arcs in order to get that footage for the movie. And Kevin Bacon, Bill Paxton, and Tom Hanks all famously were like, "Yep, never threw up once." Cameraman,
I was just gonna say, was that throw up scene real then? Because I would not blame you if you're going up and down, up and down, up and down over 600 times.
yeah. Apparently, cameramen and crewmen that were involved had some trouble, but the three main actors did not. I can't imagine doing that. That's just crazy to do that much work. But you know what, though? Worth it. Worth every second of it, because this movie still looks amazing.
And honestly, I would love a chance to be in the Vomit Comet. So to portray an astronaut and to experience the feeling of zero gravity, that's insane.
Yeah.
That really is cool.
Yeah, and it's a great way to, and it had never been used in a film before. This was the first film that really used that. And they made a deal with NASA, and NASA allowed them to do it. And the plane they used actually ended up being decommissioned shortly after. The particular plane that they used was decommissioned shortly after making of this movie. But yeah, that's just such a good way to do it, and it gives this movie a realism that you don't get if you're wearing a harness and moving around on a screen, right? You can't fully reproduce that. You can get close, but there's something about the way you move when you're truly weightless, and the way they could, grab something and move through that little kind of hatchway between the LEM and the capsule. That just works. And so I loved that.
Yeah, when there's a harness, sometimes it's hard to tell. Gravity does it really well. But something like, me and my dad watched Passengers recently, and you can tell in a lot of shots, like, oh, the way your torso is super tense, like you're in a harness.
Yeah.
You can just tell.
Yeah, I mean, you can fake it only so much before, reality is just going to set in. And to be able to be truly weightless for the majority of the stuff that you need to, and then be able to, what it also does is it makes the stuff that you're faking for it, like the little seesaw and kind of, doing a lot of close-ups and having them strapped in at certain points. It makes that work even better because now you've seen the actual people being weightless in front of you. So then if you have a shot from a different angle and they're kind of bobbing up and down and moving around a little bit, your brain just going to fill in the blanks and say, yeah, that guy's floating because he's weightless, not sitting on a seesaw.
Right, it's believable.
Yeah, it adds to that so much, and it makes it work even years and years later. It ages very well. So I really, really appreciated all of that. There was also the fact that command center, the mission control that they had, was an exact replica of the real mission control in Houston. Originally, they wanted to shoot in that room, and NASA was going to allow it, but they found out, they realized that the room itself was a little too small to fit all the camera equipment that they wanted and sound equipment and everybody. So they just built it to scale on a set. And
So just slightly bigger, but like an exact replica.
basically they could build the exact replica, but not have to put your sidewalls on it so that they could have more room to move your cameras around, in and out of it. So they did that. And one of the trivia bits I did read was that the technical advisor who had worked in Mission Control one day actually left the set looking for the elevator because Mission Control was on like the third floor of whatever building it was in. That's how real it was to him. He had been in there all day and he just instinctively went looking for the elevator and it wasn't there.
So disoriented. Yeah.
I can imagine if you spent your life working in that room and now you're on a set that looks exactly like it, that would mess with your head a little bit.
For sure.
So, but I love that too because all like the computers and everything, everything looks authentic, and so it gives it again that realism, that attention to detail, to put it in that era. To have that's why period pieces can be so much more expensive to film, right? Because you got to take everything and make it look like the period that you're doing it in. In this case, they were 25 years prior when they were making this, so it's not as big a difference, but it's still. It would be like shooting a movie today, but having everything set in the year 98, 99, 2000. It's not going to be exactly like it looks today. The architecture, the design, the interior decorations, all going to be different. And so...
And you're mimicking a real world place where a lot of people work. I mean, you even got to pay for like the experts who are going to like fact check all of your little set design stuff. That can be very expensive.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But again, like spending the money to have your people go through the vomit comet, it gives you authenticity and a longevity of that authenticity. And it makes it look good 30 years later, 27 years later, whatever it is. So I really, really appreciated that. Even like all the costuming is great, everything that everybody's wearing. The only thing they couldn't get completely accurate, and this isn't their fault, but this was another trivia piece, and I noticed it in the movie, and I'm wondering if anyone else noticed this, was they don't have a lot of like melodrama, but the one daughter is always complaining about stuff and at loggerheads with her mom, the oldest daughter. And at the beginning of the movie, when she's complaining about the Beatles breaking up and how much she hates Paul, and then you go into her room and she's listening to Jimi Hendrix, which made me laugh, but it was because the Beatles didn't let their music be used in movies at the time. So they literally couldn't use the Beatles. So they just picked another song from that era. But I love that. She's complaining about the Beatles and Paul McCartney, but while she's listening to Jimi Hendrix.
And 69, that was the year that the Beatles broke up?
69, 70, right around there, yeah. Yep.
Okay, because I didn't know they were together that long, to be honest. Not that I'm the biggest Beatles expert, but yeah.
No, but at the same time, like, it was less than a decade that they were a band, which is crazy to think about. That they were putting albums out for less than 10 years, and yet they put out a good number of albums, a lot of songs, and just the cultural touchstones that they were. But yeah, I got a kick out of that. I'm like, why is she listening to Hendrix then? You'd think she'd be lamenting and listening to the Beatles, but yeah, that's right. You can't play the Beatles. They won't let you. I think they do now, although it's still really expensive.
You know, maybe she's just so fed up with the Beatles, she's gonna put on someone else.
There you go. That's probably it. Yeah, I loved that he drove the Corvette, because there was something with, I think it was either a specific dealership or Chevy in general, where they would give the astronauts cars, and so I don't. I think Jim Lovell actually had a Corvette at one time, but I love that that's what he drove, because that feels like an astronaut's car, driving like a nice
I
Corvette.
saw that and I just thought, oh wow, I mean, astronauts are well paid, so he has a really nice sports car. That makes sense. But
Yeah.
it also makes sense that they would sponsor astronauts who are on the news daily during that time.
Mm-hmm. Um. Okay, so one of my favorite moments in this movie is when they have that moment of realization that the CO2 scrubbers on the LEM and the capsule are different. And it's great for two reasons. One is because first there's the realization of it, and he's like, "Yeah, they're square on one and they're round on the other." And it's Krantz, Ed Harris, Gene Krantz is like, "Tell me this isn't a government job. Come on!" Like, such a
No
great
one
reaction.
thought of this before.
Right, exactly. And then he gets all the engineers into the room, and the guy's like, "All right, here's what we got. We need to make this fit into this using only that. Let's go." And they just have to make it work. It's such a cool scene. And then they do. They make it work with the parts that they've got in front of them. But that moment, like, can you imagine being one of the guys in that room? The pressure. You would, like, this whole movie and this whole story is nothing but like stress and pressure. I was getting stressed out watching it this time around. I can't
But
imagine
yeah, the
living
tension
it.
is real in every scene.
And it's incredible because this is a story that doesn't have like, there's not some big climactic, it's not a battle, there's not a hero's journey, none of that, but there's so much tension throughout this movie. Whether or not you know the real story of what happens, like the way they built up all of that is so well done, for what is essentially a bunch of guys in a room talking for most of the movie. That's kind of the action of the movie, right? You don't have big set pieces of like car chases and explosions and leaping off of buildings. It's just people in rooms talking, and three guys in a tin can floating through space. But they managed to make it just suspense and tension the whole time. And that's
I mean, that's really what space travel and engineering is all about, is like solving problems that you didn't even think needed to be solved. It reminds me a lot of The Martian,
yeah.
which is written by a NASA scientist who, you know, it's based off these events pretty much. So this is real life Martian.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's probably the most amazing thing about this movie is that all of this happened. Which during test screenings, the first test screening, I don't know if you're familiar with how test screenings work, but essentially they get people in for free. They have them come and watch the movie and then fill out a little card afterwards and give their thoughts on the movie. And
Right, like beta readers.
yeah. And they had mostly positive reviews, but a few people were like, what was it? In an interview, Ron Howard revealed that some critics blasted the way what they perceived as a hokey Hollywood moment in the picture. Oh, that's the ring falling, the hokey Hollywood moment of Marilyn's wedding ring falling down the drain. I read somewhere else where one of the things that people said was they didn't believe that they would have survived that mission, because like the person that was watching the movie didn't realize it was based on a real actual NASA mission.
Right, they just thought, oh, this is so unrealistic. They'd all survive.
Yeah, that they'd all survive, that all that would happen, and it's like, no, it really did happen, and it shows. You mentioned it at the top of the show, like these astronauts are trained for these types of situations and how to react to them, and that's how they react in this movie. Everything feels like real, with that amount of training, how you would be able to get through it. because there is those moments where they haven't gotten the reentry plan yet, and they're getting a little bit. They're just starting to skirt on the edge of like, I'm gonna freak out here pretty soon if we don't start getting some info. But they never go over that line, and so I really enjoyed that, and I really liked that they, from everything that everybody I have read about has said, is like there's very little kind of artistic license taken in the events that happened. It's almost all exactly what happened and how it happened because they had all the
Right.
people to talk to about it. You know.
Which is amazing. And to speak to the realism, there's one little like scene that I love where I think it's the pilot says, "We're not at the right angle for reentry. We're not, and we don't have enough power to make it." And then he says, "And they know that. And if they knew that, they wouldn't tell us."
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things like 100%. It's not going to benefit you to know that your mission's doomed.
Right.
So if something's going wrong, they're not going to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how scary of thought is that you're hurtling towards Earth and you have the realization that, no, we're just going to skip off the atmosphere and just go off into space. Like, oh man, I can't. There's so many times watching this where I was just like, I can't imagine being in that situation. I can't imagine being Marilyn Lovell, being the spouse of an astronaut, like being the spouse of a soldier or somebody that gets deployed in the military. I've talked to quite a few of them, and I just can't imagine being that because it would just, eat at you to not know what's going on. Now take that and put that person off the planet. Like they're not only are they in a different area, they're like not even on the planet with you. And then to find out that, oh, something's gone wrong, and immediately you're getting the PR shtick or spiel from NASA while the news is telling you something completely different. And just to go through that, there's so many moments in this. I'm like, I would have crumbled into a pile of goo. I just couldn't handle that.
I mean, there's so much uncertainty in doing something no one's ever done before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No one's done it. And here they are doing this. And then to have, problems come up that they couldn't have ever anticipated, let alone plan for. And they did, and they made it. They made it work with literally technology that took up rooms that now fits in our pocket. The same level of technology can fit in your pocket now that they use to do all this stuff with. And, finding the amps they need to get things back up and running in the sequence they can with the power draw, so that they can do it. It's just, it's mind-boggling. It's amazing that all happened. And this all is real, which makes the drama, I think, stronger than anything that could be fictionalized.
It totally does. And it reminds me, I just want to plug real quick. There is a TED Talk done by Chris Hadfield, who is a real life astronaut.
Yep.
About the time that he went blind in space. And he really talks about the fear and uncertainty and just how you act as an astronaut. And as I was watching this movie, I kept thinking of that TED Talk because it's just, it captures what they're feeling in this movie. It's really incredible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One other piece I thought was interesting was Ron Howard was having lunch with Billy Wilder, another director, and said that he was thrilled to learn that Wilder deemed his movie to be Howard's best work as a director. Because, and I thought this while I was watching it this time, it's such a good movie because the guy who is your main character and the voice of the audience as well doesn't get to realize his dream, something that he's wanted for so long, and he doesn't get it. He gets so close, but he doesn't get there, but he comes home safe anyway. There's something about that just felt like it just made you feel good at the end of it for some reason, even though it's heartbreaking. It's that kind of it's that like perseverance. Like he could have given up at any point, given that he wasn't going to get to land on the moon. He wasn't going to get the thing. He made it that far, but he's like, no, I'm getting home. And there was just something really cool about that. So
Yeah, I mean, for your original goal to be, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm going to achieve the highest dream that I've ever held. That all goes out the window, and your new goal is, please let me survive this thing.
Yeah.
So it's a loss and a victory in a really weird mix of emotions.
yeah, I remember reading a quote from Jim Lovell, who said that they classified it as a successful failure was that mission. And that's the perfect way to put it. Apollo 13 was a successful failure. Everything went wrong, and it should have not turned out the way that it did, but they pulled it out. And it's a total team effort. And that's the other thing this movie does so well, is that it shows that all of this took everyone in that room and everyone on that spacecraft and everyone at NASA to make it happen. There wasn't one person that pulled it out. You don't get it without, without Jim Lovell, without Fred, without Swigert, without Ken. But you also have to have Gene Kranz. You got to have the guy, John, from Ecom. You got to have everybody doing their thing. The guys that figured out how to make that adapter for the CO2 scrubbers, or the capsule fills up with CO2 and they never have a chance to make reentry. Like all of that. And that is so great that there was not one person. It was all of them.
I mean, it even takes like the people with no lines who are checking math and
Yep.
triple checking everything. Like everyone at NASA worked together to do this. So they're all the heroes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the movie does a great job of, kind of not trying, it doesn't glorify any one or two or three people. It's all of them. And that's what's so cool about that. And there's a line early on from Jim in the movie, from Tom Hanks, talking about like it takes everybody. Everybody's a part of it, right down to the janitor sweeping the floors, right? And that, they're all proud of what they did and they're all part of it. And that's kind of the message of the movie at the end of it, is like they're all part of it. So I love that. I really enjoy this movie. I'm glad you finally got to see it. Especially, I did not know that you were a big space nerd, and kind of into space and shuttle stuff. So the fact that you finally got to see this in the movies that you have seen about the space program and about kind of space travel and going to the moon and stuff, where does this kind of sit for you, on those? I mean, and you can include things like The Martian and, fictional stuff as well.
That's really tricky, because most of the movies about space that I've seen are fictional. I learned a lot about the Apollo missions, all the Saturn rockets, all the early space travel stuff through like late night Wikipedia, and like just little mini documentaries. I do actually like documentaries. But I'd have to say this falls in line with like Hidden Figures, which is another amazing real life true story. It's like way up there at the top. Just the fact that it is a real story elevates it so much more, and the fact that it's told well, and it really hammers in those emotions. There's nothing like it. So I'm so glad I saw this movie, and I'm kicking myself because why didn't I watch it sooner?
Well,
what is wrong with me?
I mean, in your defense, like you said, it was before your time, and if you don't have somebody kind of mentioning like, hey, you should see this. Hey, have you ever seen The Right Stuff?
I've not seen The Right Stuff.
That's another one that you need to see if you like space travel. It's got John, it's about John Glenn and some of those folks.
Okay.
And that's a really good one. I also think, as far as like fictionalized ones go, Space Cowboys would be a fun one to watch if you haven't seen that yet. That's kind of...
we actually reviewed that on the picture show.
Oh, there you go.
Wait, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of The Farmer's Astronaut. That's a
Oh,
very different movie.
no, Space Cowboys is kind of, if I remember, and it's been a while since I've seen either one, but if I remember, Space Cowboys is sort of if The Right Stuff was a bunch of older guys. But Space Cowboys is fun. Right Stuff is fun. They're really good movies, especially if you're into that kind of NASA shuttle program type stuff. So I recommend those as well. But I'm so glad you got to see this. I had forgotten how good this was. I remember I've watched it a few times, but it's been years, probably 15 years at least since I've seen it, if not longer. And so I'd forgotten like how good it was, how kind of uplifting, and it's a PG movie too, so it's a nice one that you can watch with anybody. You don't have to feel like you can't show this to somebody because they may not like the humor that's in it or something. You know, sometimes even really good movies, it's like, but I know people that wouldn't be able to handle that. Like there's nothing of that here. It's very accessible.
Right. I think the one thing is there's a shower suggestive scene that if I was showing this to maybe like a high school class, I'd have to like, let's just skip a few seconds here.
Oh yeah, Jack.
But yeah, this is a pretty family friendly. Anyone can watch this kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you though, where does this rank in the world of Tom Hanks for you?
So for me and Tom Hanks, this is up there as a very good Tom Hanks movie. Although I would say that nowadays I put this above Forrest Gump. I think that this has aged much better than Forrest Gump. I still like Gump, but there's something about the way this movie and this story has aged. I think I really like Ron Howard movies, but I also like Tom Hanks I'm not as much into his rom-coms as I am more of his like goofy comedies. So stuff like The Burbs for me, I would put above Big, or Volunteers I would put above like You've Got Mail. But when it comes to his dramas, this is right up there for me with like Castaway, and what was the one I just watched? News of the World. I just recently watched. It was a new one from like a year or two ago. Was surprisingly good, better than I thought it would be. So I would rank this one fairly high. I would put this up there with, for me, with That Thing You Do, and this movie. Forrest Gump, I think, is up there, but I notched this a little bit higher than that. I also, just from Ron Howard movies, if you're not familiar with him as a director, I mean, he has done a lot. As a director, he's got 47 credits, and I haven't seen a lot of his more recent stuff except for Solo, A Star Wars Story. That was Ron Howard. But this would have been around the era of Backdraft is one of his I really like. Actually, Ransom is a very good movie. I forgot some of these he did. Cinderella Man, The Missing. Damn.
He did Splash?
Yeah, Cocoon, Splash.
That's funny to me.
Willow. Willow is one of his I really like. I will
yeah, that's a great one.
Always enjoy Willow. But yeah, he has this. Ron Howard to me feels like he fits in the same sort of arena as a Steven Spielberg. He's that kind of a director where he can make very accessible movies, and I enjoy that. And then not all of them are perfect, obviously, but then no director is. But even like the Da Vinci Code for what it is fine. It's it's kind of dumb. Conspiracy theory. The story is silly, but it's enjoyable, and he makes entertaining movies. And then he can do something like Frost Nixon, which is that's a hell of a movie. So I like Ron Howard. This is one of my favorite Ron Howard movies, and it's just a shame that I spent so much time not watching it. It's one that I feel like I ought to watch more often. So
I think that's fair.
But yeah, I did capture a few clips that I kind of want to play because there's a couple good moments in this movie that are worth listening to again if you want to hear them with me.
Oh, please.
All right. And yes, Kit London is correct. His daughter is an amazing actor and director, Bryce Dallas Howard. So let's see. This is just getting the go, no go, which I always loved.
Give me a go, no go for launch.
I just love that terminology. So I had to get that. The most famous line in the movie and one of the most famous quotes from a movie ever. Like you had to have known, you knew this quote before you saw the movie. I'm almost positive, and it is
Houston, we have a problem.
I
Which-
just figured that was always an iconic space like thing. I didn't know it came from this movie.
Yeah, and so one of the reasons that they could make this movie so accurate was not only Jim Lovell's book, but they also had transcripts from the mission that they could use. So the way that line goes down, the actual line said at the time in the mission was, Houston, we've had a problem. They changed it to we have a problem that's one of the few artistic license things, just to make it a little more like immediate threat, immediate danger. Instead of we've had a problem, kind of gives it that past tense. But I like how it happened in the movie the way it happened in the mission, which is Swigert said it first, but in the mission transcript he was a little bit garbled. So then Houston has them, say again, and that's when you get that iconic line from Tom Hanks, and everybody knows it. And you're right, like if you haven't seen his movie before, you just think this is like standard spacefarer, NASA speak of.
Houston, we have a problem.
And that's where it came from, is this movie. This is Ed Harris, which is awesome, as always, but this is Ed Harris talking about losing people on a mission.
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch.
And that, again, that's that like commanding presence that he had without being overbearing. Like he was just like, this is what's going to happen. This is the fact. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. And I love that.
And that's great. I felt the stakes when they said that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And he did follow it up with failure is not an option, which I guess the actual Gene said that he didn't say that part, but he thought that it fit, and it made sense in the movie. And it's such a good moment. And that's like at that halfway point in the movie too. We're about halfway through this movie and that happens and you're just like, yep, here we go. Strap in. Let's see. This one's called Scrubbers. I don't remember exactly what this was.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
They take square cartridges.
The ones on the limb are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
That's so good because it's so true. Like you would almost think that was something somebody wrote as a joke, but it's real. That's really how it goes down, and that's what makes it even funnier. There's square. You got to fit a square square peg in a round hole. Let's go. Let's see. Single room. Okay. Well, we'll find out.
A computer that can fit into a single room.
Oh, that's what it was. That made me chuckle because it's so true, but you think about that now and it's like, that's a weird thing to say. A computer that can fit into a single room, but that was what they had back then.
Listen, I can fit a computer into any room.
Now, yeah. Oh, yeah. So capturing that just made my day hearing that. I'm like, hey. Here's another one.
Is it the door?
Oh, is it the door? Damn it, kid.
Yep.
Oh.
Kills me every time.
Let's see. Oh, here we go.
We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this. Using nothing but that.
Oh, so good. Such a
That's it. That's your situation.
Yep.
Do your work.
Make it happen. And then you hear, like, as the murmuring starts and everybody's, you hear somebody saying, better put on some coffee. We're going to need it. It's like, yeah, you are.
I think my favorite part is when they're assembling it and the bag rips.
Oh,
They're like, can we duct tape it? And he's like, they have a second bag. That's the last bag.
They have a spare. Don't rip that one. Oh, it was so good. And then one last one. I believe this is Jean. Jim Lovell's mom. This was the line.
The moon.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. That was the moon. Huh. I guess I didn't capture her. It was the... I remember. Okay. That line is from the beginning where he says, hey, instead of going to Acapulco for Easter, why don't we go to the moon? And it was...
Let's go to the moon, right?
It was him saying that and then their reaction to it, too. That gasp just got me so much.
The moon.
So... that was great.
Out of context, that just seems like they're terrified of the moon.
It does. Yeah, exactly. There's something out there. What is it?
The moon.
I guess I didn't capture it, but the line that his mother has is, if they can make a washing machine fly, my Jim can land it. And that was, I love that. That was so good.
I did that whole scene where they're just trying to tell her he's meant to be on the moon. It's meant to be on the TV, and they're like, right, well, something happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then later on, when she's at the house and they bring in Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to sit with her during that, to keep her occupied, just so like they know somebody's there with her, and it's Neil and Buzz. Like, that's so great.
It is great.
And again,
and then
that
she
happened.
asked them, "Are you in this space program too?"
Yeah.
She has no idea who they are.
I love that. Oh, she was a delight, though. Oh man, Ron Howard's mom playing Blanche, and I kind of wish I would have caught that. Now I'm sad that I didn't capture that, but yeah, if they can make a washing machine fly, my Jimmy can land it. And
Now people have to watch the movie to hear that line.
yeah, they do, and you should. It's streaming on a few like Fubo TV and those kinds of services, or it's rentable and buyable, but it's absolutely worth seeing. If you haven't seen it before, watch it. If you haven't seen it in a long time, watch it again. You'll be surprised how good it is, and how much probably even better than you remember it being it is. Because I remembered it being very good. It was better than I remembered.
I'm especially glad that I have it on DVD because now I can watch it anytime I want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Austin, thank you so much for being here this week. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
I've been meaning to have you back for a while. I had your dad on a little bit ago, and that's always fun. But you know, it's good to get the young blood in here too. So now you mentioned at the top of the show you talk movies with your dad all the time. Let people know about that show, where they can find it.
Yes, I do. I am from The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rude, and you can look that up. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, and so many more podcatchers. So if you do a quick search for that, you'll find us.
The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rude.
That's right.
Excellent.
You can also find me on Twitter if you'd like. I'm at Austin N. Rude, and that's ROOD. That's how you spell Rude.
That is the proper spelling of rude.
Correct.
Excellent. I am on Twitter as well as TV's Travis, TVS Travis, and I love to talk to anybody about movies, TV, comics. I do a show on Highlander, so if you want to talk to me about Immortals, I'm down for that too. This show, if you want to catch it live, you can be in the chat room and be like Nisbet, Ace Cat, Kit London, Phil Rude, Danny Orr is in there, Amy Frost. And catch it live Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Time at twitch.tv/tvstravis. And then it's available as a podcast on Wednesdays at tvstravis.com. Search for Wait You Haven't Seen in any podcatcher. It's going to be there. Searching for it in the podcatchers, I put punctuation and things in there. I didn't make it very search engine optimized because I'm terrible at that. So if you have trouble finding it, go to tvstravis.com. There's links right there to add it to your favorite podcatcher, finding it on Spotify, Apple, any of that kind of stuff. It's also available after the fact on YouTube. I am working on getting enough subscriptions to get the vanity URL. So for right now, you have to search for Wait You Haven't Seen on YouTube, and you can watch the video, listen to it. It usually goes up about a day later there as well. So, and if you do check it out on YouTube, and you can throw me a subscription, that'll help me get to the point where I can have like a vanity URL, and it's easier to tell people where to go. Right now, it's just a bunch of numbers and letters, and it's impossible. But yeah, that's where you can find this show. Next week, I am beginning Spooky Month. October begins, and I'm going to have, just like last year, the crew from one of my other podcasts, Gore, which is all about horror movies, is coming on, and we're going to talk scary movies all month. So Monica, the Wicked Kitten, Wesley, the Dreadlord, and Faye are coming on, and we're going to talk next week. We're going for a classic, An American Werewolf in London. And we got a couple people that have never seen that before. I can't wait. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I'm looking forward to it. So that's going to be a lot of fun. American Werewolf in London. We got a couple more for the rest of this month that I'll be mentioning as we go that are going to be a lot of fun. A horror anthology. We've got a horror comedy coming up. So some good stuff. And then the end of the month, I got a real fun one for the end of October. So stay tuned for that. But next week is American Werewolf in London. I can't wait for that. Have you ever seen that?
I have not seen that.
So it's got one of the better werewolf like transformation scenes in a movie.
This is my dad speaks very highly of that movie, and I guess now I have to watch it so I can tune in next week.
There you go. See, now you've got a legitimate excuse to watch it, not just because it's a great movie.
Love those.
Yeah. Well, Austin, once again, thank you so much for being here. This has been wonderful, and definitely anytime you want to come back, maybe we'll get you back. We'll watch The Right Stuff.
Sure. Maybe I'll make a list of space movies.
There you go.
I'm always glad to be on your show.
Absolutely. You're welcome back anytime. So until
Thank you.
Until next week, An American Werewolf in London with the Gore crew. This has been Wait You Haven't Seen. Remember to enjoy your movies and be excellent to each other. Thanks. Have a good night.
If they could get a washing machine to fly, my Jimmy could land it.
Ha! I did get it.
Perfect way to end that episode.
The other one I had that I almost used was from the beginning of it when they were done with their first party and Marilyn comes out and she's just like, I'm drunk and I don't want to clean up. Let's just sell the house. And Jim's out there doing the thumb thing over the moon. He's like, yeah, sure, we'll sell the house. That cracked me up, but I'm glad I went with that line.
It's a good one.
It really is. This movie's just great. It's just great all around. Well, thank you so much, Austin. This was fun. I loved talking movies with you. And you've got great insights on stuff. So it's cool to get a different perspective than my own. It's nice to get especially a younger perspective.
That's right. I'm the voice of my generation.
There you go. Hey, nothing wrong with that. You can be that. But yeah, we'll definitely have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I love being on other podcasts. I've been growing my movie reviewing kind of opinions because I used to just be like, movies are good. I like this one. And kind of being on mic with my dad has taught me how to look at movies more closely and articulate the feelings that I have about.
Yeah, it's one thing to just take in a movie, and I am of that same mindset where I like movies and entertainment. So it takes a lot for me to dislike something, but you can be critical of a thing without disliking it. And that's a difference, and that's a skill that you kind of learn. And being on mic with your dad helps that, coming on to other shows. So you watch a movie with a slightly different eye now, probably, than you did a couple of years ago. You look at things differently. So
yeah,
it's really cool. There you go. You guys can both come on together and do the right stuff. Alrighty. Yep. Thank you again for being on. And this will go out Wednesday. I will tag you when it hits the feeds.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good night, Austin.
You too. Bye.
And thank you all for being here. It was great. I love a good active chat room going on. Ace, you prefer American Werewolf in Paris? I saw that one in theaters. Obviously, I didn't see London in theaters because it came out the year I was born. But I prefer London as I go back and watch them. Younger me would have preferred Paris because I saw that one first, I think. Pretty sure. But Nisbet, you're good. You came at a perfectly fine time. So no worries there. Phil, yeah, we'll get both of you back on for the right stuff. That sounds awesome. Because that'd be great. Because you mentioned, Phil, during the episode in chat that all the shuttle launches you saw in school. I early on, young first few years of school, we did the same thing. We got a lot of the shuttle launches that we would watch. We would stop class and watch them. And then eventually they stopped being a thing. So but it would be great to have kind of, 2.5 generations worth, because you're a little bit older than I am. And so you'd have a different connection to something like The Right Stuff versus my connection to it versus Austin's and space program and all that. That'll be a fun conversation. Yep. Wheel in the old TV cart, the old AV cart with a big VHS top loader. Really? Oh, that's awesome, Amy. Lots of space. Yeah. Yeah, it was a big deal for a long time. Let's see. Challenger was 80. Was that 86 for the Challenger? Because I remember that. I'm trying to think. I think I might have been in kindergarten or first grade when that happened. I don't remember. Oh, Space Camp. Kit, 1986. Okay. I went around my neighborhood as a kid collecting bottles and cans to try and get enough money to go to Space Camp. I wanted to go to Space Camp so bad. It was what wasn't happening. At 10 cents a can, I did not collect nearly enough. I didn't collect enough to buy a Space Camp t-shirt, let alone actually go to Space Camp. But boy, did I want to. All right. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out. This was great. I love having Austin on. Austin's great. Phil, you done good with raising that kid. Just going to say. I haven't seen the movie Space Camp in good God, I don't know how long. So I have a feeling it doesn't hold up as well as I would think, but you never know. Yeah, we got fun. We're speaking of space. We're watching Star Trek tomorrow. For those were the days. Spock's brain. We're jumping the shark, as it were, all month. So Star Trek tomorrow, original series. Original recipe Star Trek. Highlander on Tuesday, as always, with Audie and myself. And more BioShock. We got to finish up BioShock. I think we're going to do it this week. We're going to do that Wednesday. So that's what's coming up over the next couple of days. And then, like I said, American Werewolf in Paris kicking off. Spookytober. I can't wait for some of these other ones. I can't wait to announce them and let you guys see them because it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun stuff. So... all right, everybody. Well, until then, everybody have a great night. You're wonderful. Love you all. It's lovely to have you here, as always. And we'll see you soon. But until then, Bye.